Hi guys! In this video, I'm going to teach you some properties of equality. These are the properties that allow us to solve the equations using the methods that you probably already know. I just want to make sure that we know that they have an official name. Remember, you need to be taking notes on this. I'm going to try to talk fast so that the video is short, but you can always pause the video if you need more time to write things down. We're going to be starting with the reflexive property. This property says that any number in the world is equal to itself. For instance, the number 5 has a value of 5. This was really important in your geometry classes last year when you were doing proofs. Our next property is called the symmetric property. The symmetric property tells us that we can take an equation and we can change what side of the equal sign that the things are written on. So instead of A equals B, we are allowed to say B equals A. This will become important when we want to put the letter on the left-hand side of an equation, okay? Our next property is called the transitive property. The transitive property says if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A has to be equal to C. I like to think of this property as cutting out the middleman. Since A and C are both equal to B, we can get rid of B and just kind of smush it together and make A equal to C. Here's another example of that. If X and Y are both equal to 3, then X and Y must be equal to each other. We're cutting out the middleman. Our next property is called substitution. Substitution says that if you have two things that are equal to each other, for instance, if A is equal to B, then everywhere that you see a letter A, you can remove the A and replace it with the letter B instead, and vice versa. Everywhere you see a letter B, you can remove the B and replace it with an A. This is great for solving, for simplifying, and for checking our answers. Here is an example of when we would use substitution. So it says that X is equal to Y, and 9 plus X is equal to 15. That means that also 9 plus Y is equal to 15. Our next properties are going to be used specifically for solving equations, which will be taught in video 2. Our first property is the addition property, and the addition property says that in an equation, you are allowed to add the same number to both sides of the equation, and it will still remain an equation, two things that are equal to each other. Okay? So if I wanted to add 3 to both sides of this equation, I can, and it'll still be a true statement. We also have a subtraction property, which says that if we have an equation, we are allowed to subtract the same number from both sides of the equation, and it will still remain a true statement. Now, in subtraction, the order does matter, so it's important that you're always subtracting the number and that you're not accidentally swapping it and doing the number minus. So subtracting the same number on both sides. Continuing our pattern, we also have a multiplication property. This says that if you have an equation, you are allowed to multiply both sides of the equation by the same number, and it will still remain a true statement. For instance, if I wanted to multiply both sides by 3, I'm allowed to do that. It will not change anything. It'll look different, but it would still yield the same answer. And finally, we also have a division property. Very similar to our previous properties, it says that we can divide by the same number on both sides of the equal sign. Just like in our subtraction problem, it is important that we are dividing by the number. The order does matter. I can't switch to C divided by A. That would be a totally different problem. I also have to stipulate that I'm not dividing by 0 because it is mathematically impossible to divide by 0. So make sure that you're dividing by a number that is not 0. Here's an example with variables. This concludes our properties. Make sure that you wrote them all down, and in our next video, we'll use these properties to solve some equations.